I told him, take risks. I didn't quite win. And I was really angry about that, really upset, disappointed, just all the negative stereotypes you can think about. It was really pretty scary at first, wondering, am I going to get this high level position? You serve at the pleasure of the president, and I had done something to make the president want to replace me. I had to adjust, and it was humbling. It was humiliating, and I was really upset about it, to be honest with you. My wife did not work outside the house, so it was a very fraught time financially for us. Had it just been me alone, I'm not sure I would have had the guts, the courage to fight.
Hi, I'm your host, Reena Suri, and welcome to Thriving Changes. Here's a question worth considering. What happens when doing your duty and doing what's right aren't always the same thing? In this episode of Thriving Changes, Captain David Iglesias reflects on a career shaped by military service, public leadership, and decisions made under intense pressure that carry real consequences. He shares with us what leadership really looks like when the right choice isn't always the easy one. This conversation is about the moments that shape who we become and what it takes to lead with integrity. If you've ever wrestled between doing what's expected versus doing what feels right, this conversation is for you. Let's dive in. Welcome, Captain. It is such a pleasure to have you on Thriving Changes. I'm so grateful that you took out the time to do this.
Oh, you're very welcome. No, I've been looking forward to this. I haven't done one of these in a while, so let's see if I'm still got my touch.
I'm sure you have. You have so many years of experience. In fact, you've been part of some incredibly challenging positions with careers, like with law, national security, military, and now, of course, teaching the next generation of leaders. And all of those situations, I think they came with certain amount of ambiguity, unclear answers, not the full picture. And you had to navigate and make some very hard choices, which had real consequences.
Right.
So I am sure if that has trained you well, and being a lawyer yourself, you're prepared for much of the conversation that's coming today. I really want to use this time to unpack some of those situations, your life experiences, and what actually went through from your perspective, and how did it impact you and develop you as a leader and as a professor today.
Yeah, all topics that I'm more than happy to discuss. Sure.
All right. Thank you. I'm excited for our conversation today. Before we dive into it, usually we start with an introduction. How I was introduced to you was that I was told, that movie, have you seen that movie, A Few Good Men? I said, yeah, it's a pretty famous movie. And he said, yeah, the gentleman who plays Tom Cruise, the role of Tom Cruise, he is my professor. I said, wow, all right, that's a story. And so tell me, so you were a Navy JAG. So just give us a little background of your career, just a little bit of how that movie, that role and that case, how it transpired.
Sure. So I spent 30 years full-time and part-time in the Navy JAG Corps. So it was my first job out of law school. So I was 4 years active, and then I went into reserves for 20 years. Then I went back to full-time active service for 6 more years. So I retired at 30 years of service in 2014. And I was a captain when I retired, and that's what I asked my students to call me, because I figured there's lots of PhDs on campus, lots of doctors, lots of professors, a few misters, and I didn't like any of them because they didn't really fit. So I said, please call me captain. And the students did a great job. That's what they call me as. I decided that the military was something I would try. I initially thought just for a few years. It turns out it hit the sweet spot because I'm a structured person and the military is very structured. And so it was 30 great years. It went like this. It was because people say, oh, it's so hard. It's true for some MOSs, military occupational specialties. But for lawyers, during a time of general peace, it wasn't bad. So I started off Cold War, and then 9/11 occurred. And then that changed everything because they really needed lawyers. Lawyers used to be on the back bench, so to speak. And then 9/11 occurred, and we needed lawyers to help prosecute and defend people accused of war crimes. And we also needed people who were able to read treaties and status of forces agreements. So I had that background. So I figured, well, I'll talk to my wife and see what she thinks of me going back in as a full timer. And she said, you bet. And so I spent 6 great years, and it was a great fit. I loved it. And I've helped other students because I teach at Wheaton College here in the Chicago area. And I've been able to help several get into the various JAG course. So it's been a really good fit.
Good. So that particular incident, which inspired the movie, A Few Good Men, that happened pretty early in your career, right?
Very early. So it happened way back in 1988. So I was active initially 85 to about 88. I'm sorry, I misspoke. 86 is when it happened.
Oh, okay. 86.
I think it was my second or third trial. And for one of the teammates, it was his very first trial. So there were 3 of us that defended 3 separate Marines, 3 separate trials. And yeah, it was, I knew what I was doing, but not really. I'd only tried a couple cases. So the movie really, I think, captured pretty well how unexperienced 2 out of the 3 were.
Even Tom Cruise's character is pretty new and fresh into his role. And you're saying that there were 3 separate trials. The movie came out, I think, in 1992. Not too much time had lapsed from the real incident or the case, which was in 86. So how close was it to the real life?
As a college professor, I'd grade it as about a B. So the movie and the real event occurred in Guantanamo, Naval Station Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. True.
Right.
It involved Marines. True. It involves obedience to orders as a defense. True. Now, the big difference was in the real case, the victim lived, whereas in the movie, he dies. So that is one major difference. And there are a few other differences, but I would say overall, he kind of captured the zeitgeist of what was going on then.
So what did you feel when you heard that the case that you were involved in is now being made into a movie? What did it feel like?
It felt great. I had actually started writing a short story about it called Incident at Guantanamo, but I never finished the story. And then one of the 10 lawyers that went down there initially to investigate, her name is Debbie Sorkin. My last name should sound familiar because her brother, Aaron Sorkin, was a playwright. And he wrote the play. So the play occurred first, and then he wrote the screenplay for a terrific movie. So, yeah, so I thought about it, and it was a really odd feeling to go to the movie the first time back in December of 1992 with my wife and realize I know what's going to happen. I know what this is about. And it was, like I said, it was close enough to the real case that I knew fairly well what was going to happen. And I was right.
Okay. Did that dialogue really happen? You can't handle the truth.
No. So there was not a documentary. So people ask me that all the time because it's been voted one of the 10 best movie lines ever.
Yeah.
And I'll have to say, I can't think of any legal movie that's actually better than that in terms of setting up drama and courtroom discussions and whatnot. Okay. No one had ever done, I don't think, a movie. Well, there's Kane Mutiny Court Martial back in the 50s or 60s, but that took place on a ship with using a procedure that is rarely used anymore, if ever. This happened on land. It happened with the Marine Corps. And people always think, well, you were a Marine. I said, no, I was Navy. So the Department of the Navy includes the U.S. Marine Corps. So I defended sailors, U.S. Navy sailors, and U.S. Marines. And in this case, I was called to defend a Marine. And I had other clients who were Marines. So culturally, there's differences, but it's one force, one fight.
So who did you defend? Which character in the movie did you defend?
So in the movie, there was a big black guy and a little skinny white guy. Mm-hmm. My client looked a lot like the little skinny white guy. He was maybe 19 years old. I think his real name was John Palermo, but in the movie they call him Downey or something like that.
Yes.
Private First Class Downey, I think.
Yes, I think so.
His first name.
Yeah, I can't remember, but I do remember who you're referring to. I think he's the gentleman who says in the end that what did we do wrong?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And he asked Corporal Dawson, what did we do wrong? And Dawson said, we didn't defend Willie. We didn't protect Willie.
Yes. Oh, I didn't know that victim lived, the gentleman who...
Yes, and remember who the director was, Rob Reiner, the late Rob Reiner, who was known for his liberal causes, but I think he did a pretty good job of kind of capturing the
Yeah.
essence of the
Yeah.
cultures and the court martial culture quite well.
And so, what exactly is Code Red?
The Code Red is what the Marines called hazing, an officially sanctioned hazing.
Mm,
So in the old days, a Code Red, well, it was only used by the Guantanamo Marines because I asked around and I said, look, I've heard of a blanket party and
mm,
I've heard of other things, a GI shower, which is also hazing. But the Marines, for whatever reason, in Guantanamo called it a Code Red. So we were able to, through our investigation, determine that a junior officer, played by Kiefer Sutherland, is the one who actually ordered the Code Red. Now, he didn't talk to us because he'd lawyered up. So we didn't get a statement from him, but we knew what he said based on what his Marines told us. When we met them, it was August of 1986. It was hot, humid. They were in the brig, so we went to the brig. Now, brig is what the Navy Marine Corps team calls prison. So we went to those bars and people
mm,
walking around a big courtyard. And we asked them what happened. They said, we were ordered to do a code red, so we did. Now, that's a problem because they confessed to NCIS agents that they'd done the code red. We had to somehow determine, are there any exceptions to this confession? We were
mm,
able to determine not really, but they were young. These are all first tour U.S. Marines. So they were 18, 19 years old. Their only experience with the Marines had been boot camp. In boot camp, when an officer asks you to jump, you're not going to question it. You're going to say, how high, sir, and you're going to jump. So they didn't have the experience necessary, I didn't think, we didn't think, to challenge the order. So they followed what you and I would consider to be a illegal order.
mm. And was it considered illegal, Code Red, at that time?
Yes, because you can never order somebody to break the law legally. You can order people to follow the law, but in our view, they were ordered to give a bad haircut to the victim,
Yeah.
Private First Class Willie Alvarado, his name was changed to Private First Class Willie Santiago. So they didn't change his name very much.
Yeah.
That's one other reason I knew. Wow, Sorkin, he didn't change much of the
Yeah.
names. In fact, one of the names of the attorneys he actually kept. So the Kiefer Sutherland character was named Kendrick, Lieutenant Kendrick. The real Lieutenant Kendrick was a woman, Navy JAG. Her client took the deal. So I haven't talked about the deal yet because the Marines are very protective of their image.
Mm,
They didn't want it to come out that a junior officer had ordered an illegal conduct.
right.
They said, if you plead guilty and take a bad conduct discharge, you're out. You can go home. 7 of the 10 Marines, because 10 Marines jumped on Alvarado Santiago, gave him a bad haircut.
Mm,
My client's only role was to turn the lights on and off. He never even touched the victim, which is one reason he didn't want to plead guilty. I don't blame him. I mean, why get it back on a discharge when your only role in this was to turn the lights on and off? The others had more aggressive roles. So I'm not going to question that.
What did this real life incident teach you about obedience, of speaking up, or following orders without questioning?
Sure. You have to understand, I was 28 years old, I want to say, when I had this case. My clients were 10 years younger than me.
Mm,
I knew that we were only obligated to follow legal orders. And I had, as a lawyer, as somebody who had studied the law, somebody who'd been in the Navy for a year or two at that point, I knew enough to know what an illegal order was. These kids didn't know that. And I call them kids because they were so young.
yeah.
But we entrust a lot of responsibility on 18 and 19-year-olds in our military because they have to. We expect the officers to issue only legal orders, and 99.9% of the time they do. Rarely, and this is why I started writing my book, I thought I'll never see this defense again, obedience to orders. And I was right. So I did defense cases for about 2 years, and then the other 2 years of my 4-year tour, I did other types of work.
Okay. So coming back now, moving over to your real life, as in apart from the movie, it's just so interesting to learn about this. But I was reading about you, and so you've moved through different cultures and countries
Right.
early on in your
Right.
life. How did that prepare you for all the roles that you've done in your life?
You bet. So the United States is an enormously diverse country. We have people from all over the world. And I was a son of missionaries in Panama. My father was a full-blood indigenous Kuna Indian from Panama. My mother was a German American from Minnesota. My father's father was a medicine man. My mother's father was a Presbyterian minister. So right there, I was used to very different perspectives on how things work. So that prepared me for the enormous diversity that's in the military. We have people, like I said, from everywhere. And that was true then. That's true now. It's probably truer now. We have a lot more women in the armed forces now, including my daughter, who's active duty Navy. But at that time, most of the women tended to be in the nurse corps or a few of the other staff corps. You didn't see them doing what's called line work. Line work, that's running ships, flying planes, running submarines, things like that. But my background, learning 3 different languages and being a missionary kid, really got me ready for the enormous diversity of the U.S. military. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your service and for the work that you've done. Tell me, what drew you to public service? You come from a missionary background, like you grew up in that. So what attracted you to public service?
It just seemed like something that was a lot more important than making a lot of money early in my life. I had friends who were earning a lot more money early, right out of law school. And I thought, well, that's good for them. But I was always attracted to the Navy, not as much the other branches of the service. I think because I grew up on a little island in the Caribbean, and I'd see Navy ships go by occasionally. And I was absolutely enchanted by that. And then my 3rd year in law school, I actually had a chance to visit a aircraft carrier, and I was just mesmerized. I kind of analogize it to falling in love. I fell in love with this gigantic gray ship that moved and had 5,000 people on it. And I'm really glad I did that. It really changed my life.
That was your initial, that's what attracted you. But what kept you stay on it, continue with it over the years?
Nobody's ever asked me that question. I guess I like the mission, which in the Navy, our fleets are always out. Peacetime, wartime, gray zone, which is where we are now. It's not peacetime really. It's not really wartime either. So where are we? I just thought this is really important to help the country. I want to give back. My father was an immigrant. My mother was not. But I just thought this country's really blessed me a lot, and I want to give back. I want to serve a period of time. I had no idea I'd serve 30 years. I thought it'd be more like 5, but whatever. I just really liked what I was doing, and I felt like it was important to the country, so I kept doing it.
Nice. If we strip away all the titles and the positions, you've held some very important positions in your life. And if you take away, how would you describe yourself as a person?
Somebody who'd take risks. And I had a chance to speak at Wheaton's graduation in 2014, and I told them, take risks. It's not popular in our culture because I think a lot of college students want to play it safe. And if I would have played it safe, I would have never left New Mexico and never joined the Navy. I wouldn't have been serving my country. But I risked doing a lot, and I was blessed. I took chances, and I was rewarded for that. I'm really glad I did that.
So in one of the most prominent positions was you were appointed by President George W. Bush as the U.S. Attorney for the District of New Mexico.
Right.
This was in August 2001.
Correct.
Right? And then you were confirmed by the U.S. Senate in October of that same year. So walk us through that. How did that happen, and what did that mean?
Yeah, so I had run for state attorney general 2 years before that and did pretty well. I got 48.6% of the vote, which is pretty good for a first-time statewide race. But what nobody told me was if you do really well in a first-time political race, you have a future in politics. I didn't know that. I just figured I was going to run and win. I didn't quite win. And I was really angry about that, really upset, disappointed, just all the negative stereotypes you can think about. But then when Bush won in 2000, I thought maybe I'll apply for the U.S. attorney position because it's a federal version of what I ran for at the state. Here's the funny thing. It's a much bigger budget and a much bigger office, what I actually end up getting than what I had run for. So it worked out fine in the end. But it was really pretty scary at first, wondering, am I going to get this high level position? Because every president gets to hire about 4,000 people. And of those 4,000, about, make sure I got my numbers right, about 400 need confirmation by the Senate. So I was one of 400 people who had to get confirmed by the Senate. It's a big deal. I didn't realize how big it was. We had a big federal court ceremony. I got to meet the judges and shake their hands. And they treated me like I was one of them, which I couldn't believe that in my early 40s that I was treated like a much older federal judge.
And then, of course, the firing happened.
Yeah, yeah. And then I got a phone call in December. This is funny, December 7th, which is Pearl Harbor Day. You know, that's a day that the Japanese Empire
Yes.
attacked our fleet in 1941. I got this phone call from a guy from Maine Justice saying that the administration wanted to replace me. And I said, what's going on, Mike? He goes, all I can tell you is we want to go a different way. I said, okay. And the thing they don't tell you about political jobs is unless you're a judge who gets lifetime appointment or like an FBI director who typically gets 10 years appointment, you serve at the pleasure of the president. And I had done something to make the president want to replace me. And I thought long and hard about that. And I said, my numbers are good. My office just got a evaluation like a few months ago and I passed with flying colors. So what's going on? I got to tell you, it was a real shock because I had planned a post U.S. attorney career in politics and I was going to give it my best. And God had different plans and I had to adjust. And it was humbling. It was humiliating. And I was really upset about it, to be honest with you.
It was very public. It was a very public.
And public.
Yeah.
Yeah, because most people get fired, that's quiet. No one really knows about
This is
it.
a public event.
Yeah, and the fact that I spoke out made it even more public. So I got profiled by the New York Times and all these major periodicals.
So at that point of time, you were fired for, they said that for performance issues.
Mhm.
That's the reason that they gave you, which contradicts your whole career span. Like I was reading that you were selected twice to train other federal prosecutors to pursue election crimes. And you were also one of the two chiefs that the federal prosecutors invited to teach at a voting integrity symposium. And with all those credentials, you were being questioned about performance issues.
Yeah, and unfortunately, who they sent to testify didn't tell the truth under oath. And he should have known that the office within the Justice Department that rates people had rated all of us at least twice during our terms. We had all passed. So there was no issue about performance. What they should have done is just said, look, Mr. Iglesias is a political appointee. We can hire and fire. We don't need to tell you. And that's true. But instead, they misrepresented. And then when our integrity is called in, when our performance is called into question, we had to fight. So we all were in contact. We said, let's fight. So we all testified in front of Congress twice on the same day. So at the House and at the Senate the same day in March of 2007.
Okay. And you were appointed in 2001.
One.
So about 6 years in
Correct.
6 years into it. So ultimately, of course, the report came out and all the charges were clear and it was considered to be politically initiated.
And I wish I could move my camera to show you I've got a letter of apology from the Attorney General of America.
Oh, really?
He apologized for how they treated us and how he treated me. So I consider that to be a win because you never get written letters of apology from any government official. It's dangerous. In my 30 years of being a public sector attorney, I think I wrote one letter of apology. That was it.
But as you said, Captain, it wasn't easy. It was must have been very challenging in that moment when it was all happening. What was going on in you? What were you thinking?
I was thinking it's going to get better, and I know I didn't do anything wrong. So I knew eventually that these investigations, there were 7 separate investigations that were launched as a result of our firings. I knew eventually we would be vindicated. So I just waited. And I also knew that I got a justice. So I knew that we would be cleared because I had my faith in God. So yeah, I wasn't worried about that. I just didn't know how long it would take. And I had to pay the bills and put food on the table. I had four little kids at the time. My wife did not work outside the house. So it was a very fraught time financially for us.
How long did that period go on for?
I was out of work for 7 months. So I got fired in early '07. And then I took a job with a big firm based out of DC. It wasn't a law firm, it was like a national security firm.
Mm.
So I think so it lasted about 7, 8 months total. But when you're not bringing in a steady income, that seems like forever, right?
It is hard and challenging. When you were cleared, how did that feel when it finally came out that you're off?
Yeah, I think the letter from the Attorney General is what did it for me, saying, okay, this is what I expected. It took 2 years for us to get the letter because we got the letter in fall of 2009, I want to say. Yeah, I think that's right. Oh, no, maybe it was eight. I think it was eight. Yeah, because it was Michael McCasey who was a Bush appointee. But how did it feel? It felt good, but I think I got the letter. Was I back in the Navy? I may have been because this job with the private firm didn't work out very well. I didn't really like it, and it just wasn't a good fit for me. It was a great firm. It's been around a while. It's got a good reputation. I was getting paid well, so I should give you the good things first. But it just wasn't what I was used to. I wasn't used to the adrenaline. I wasn't used to the I'm making a difference. I'm putting bad guys away. I'm prosecuting criminals. I didn't have any of that.
And that's what was driving you when you were talking about your calling initially. That's what I heard. So let me quote you. You were on The Daily Show in 2008 with Jon Stewart, and you said that to use a Star Wars kind of imagery, I thought I was working for the Jedi Knights and I was working with Sith Lords. What did this teach you about integrity? Was all that investment and fight worth the time and effort that you put in?
Yes, I want to say yes. I had tried that line out earlier with the BBC, and the guy I was talking to was too old to get it because he wasn't following Star Wars. So if you remember Star Wars, there's the Jedi Knights who are good guys, and then there's the Sith Lords who are bad, they're
The
evil, right? And so when I said that, the audience, they thought that was a funny thing because Jon Stewart's audience is pretty young. So I
Mm,
knew they would get it, and they did. Had I not fought it, had I not gone public, people would just assume, I guess he's conceding the fact that he wasn't doing a good job. And I knew I was. And my parents had raised me to believe that the truth will set you free, that the truth is always more important than the lie. So it was my job to defend my own name. And my colleagues, I think, would all agree with that. So they defended their
mm,
names as well. It was a massive miscalculation on the part of the Bush DOJ, Justice Department, that they thought we'd go away quietly. We may have had somebody not testified that we had performance related issues because that was clearly off the table. That was clearly an attack on our ability to be competent, ethical U.S. attorneys.
mm. When we talk about courage, and that goes with the military life, when we talk about it, it's a very hyped, a very glossy picture or image that we see. But in everyday life, courage can seem very different in a lived experience. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we didn't have the same level of courage, I don't think, as some of our frontline fighters do, because no one was shooting at us or wanting to kill us. But they did want to ruin our ability, I think, to get good jobs, to get decent jobs, to defend ourselves. And we said, no, we're not going to do that. I'm just really glad that I was fired with six other people who had great records. Had it just been me alone, Rena, I'm not sure I would have had the guts, the courage to fight. But the fact that I had six colleagues that had similar, almost identical stories actually as
Mm,
mine gave us enough. It was a critical mass to fight back. In fact, I call them the Justice League because they were like those cartoon characters that
mm.
fought for justice.
Yeah, they were from other states.
Yes, California, Washington State, Nevada, and Arizona.
Tell me, what most often pulls leaders off the course when they're under pressure? Is it fear? Is it ego? Is it loyalty? Now that with all your experience, what would you say when they pursue that line of action? What makes them do those things?
Now you're asking about us. Why do we fight, or
No.
why? What?
Why would somebody misrepresent the
Oh,
case?
yeah. I think because loyalty is the coin of the realm in politics, and loyalty typically means you're going to. And this kind of ties in with my case in Guantanamo. You're going to follow orders, whether they're political or military orders. And these young lawyers just blindly, in my view, followed orders to get those 7 U.S. attorneys out quietly. They did the absolute wrong thing by lying about our records. What they should have said was, hey, these are fine U.S. attorneys, but we reserve the right to hire other people to take their place for whatever reason. And that might have done it because that would have been the truth. But instead, they chose the low road with a predictable result because once your integrity is called into question, you have to fight it in order to maintain it.
No, but good for you that and I guess you said that camaraderie, that having the others with you who were ready to stand and do it together, that gave you the courage and the
Right.
strength to go on with it. You mentioned you ran for the New Mexico Attorney General after this, prior.
No, I did not. And I could have, but I wanted to make sure if my name was clear first,
Right.
because it would have been terrible to have this sword hanging over me and running. My opponent would have said, this guy, he thinks he's God's gift to humanity and he's still being investigated, which would have been partially true about the investigation. No, I did not run for office after being fired from the Justice Department.
Hmm. Which was the office that you ran prior?
I was the attorney general.
Okay,
Now,
yeah.
thank you for getting my titles right because I've been wrongly introduced as a district attorney, which is typically for a couple of counties of a state. I've been referred to as the U.S. Attorney General, which is for the
Which,
entire country. I've been
yeah.
referred to as the New Mexico Attorney General, which is an elected position. And I was
Mhm.
none of those. I was the U.S. Attorney for New Mexico.
And then you ran for the New Mexico Attorney General.
No, I ran first, and that got me in front of the political people who
And
made
that's you
sure.
how you got this
Yes,
position.
right.
Okay. And that's the one that you lost also.
Correct.
So you've seen a significant amount of lows as well in your career. What kept you going through that? What stories were you telling yourself and what got you through?
Yeah, the life of Lincoln was inspirational because he ran 6 times until he became president. So he ran for Congress and got beat. He ran for president and got beat. It was on his sixth try did he finally get to be the U.S. president. So he was inspirational. And again, also my faith in God, a God that has a plan for my life. And I was convinced that part of that plan was to prosecute at a federal level. So I just had to say, look, faith requires people to take chances, in my view. So I took the chance and it worked out. Of course, being fired was not my idea, but it worked out fine because people still ask me about that, like you are. And it's been, gosh, many years.
Yeah. What have been some significant learnings in those periods? Because I guess we grow the most in our lowest phases of our lives.
Yeah, so I like some of the quotes that I've read. I do some training, and Winston Churchill said basically, defeat is not fatal, and you need to treat success as a temporary state between defeats or between failure. And I think that's absolutely true. Look, you can learn a lot from both, but I think you can learn more from failure because you have to adjust and make sure you don't do that again.
I'm also hearing a lot of positive mindset. You kept telling yourself that it's going to be okay. And your faith was, of course, a big part of that.
Sure.
That I've not heard a single time in this conversation where you've said that you feared that it's not going to work out.
Yeah, I mean that's correct. And part of my training is look, you have to take chances in life and not all those chances are going to work out and you have to be willing to deal with that. I just talked to some Wheaton basketball players just a few weeks ago and that was the theme. It was called The Value of Failure. Somebody wrote a book called Failing Forward, which I think is a terrific way to
Right.
visualize what failure can do. I failed and I've succeeded in my life.
Right. It's a great analytic, I think, a comparison. And I love that title as well. I think I've heard about that book. Yeah, Failing Forward. So you retired in 2014, and since then you've been the director of faith, politics, and economics and politics with at
Correct.
at
Correct.
Wheaton. So When you are in front of students, which is that one story or one season of your life that you like to share with your students?
I tell them about failure. I tell them that, look, dream big, take chances, don't always take the safe route, but you have to be ready to fail. And it's not the end of life. Because I think a lot of these young kids, because they've done well in life to that point, but they're 18 years old, straight A's, best schools, and they're going to go on to grad schools and make a lot of money and whatnot, or not. And I tell them it's okay to not do whatever you want to do on your timetable, because that just life doesn't work that way. I don't know anyone who's doing exactly what they plan to do in college. And I know a lot of people who they're from all over the political spectrum, but that's a truism. You never end up doing exactly what you think you want to do.
What would be that one thing that you have learned which you could have only learned through failure?
That failure can actually be a blessing. That you don't have to win to be a winner. You can fail and still be a winner in the bigger scheme of things. And by that, I mean your values are intact. You have a successful family, because families last, careers don't. Jobs come and go, titles come and go. Your family should not come and go. Your family ought to be something that you maintain for your entire life. And I think if you talk to my 4 daughters, they would all have positive things to say about me.
But it's a hard one, that statement that you made, that it can be a blessing. I do some career coaching and I use that dialogue once in front of somebody who had been without a job for 7-8 months, and I could instantly see the body language shift,
Right.
because as you said, it can be difficult, right? You have to still put food on the table, you have bills to pay, it's taxing. And so when you say, although I do believe that it can be a blessing, because it has been a blessing in my life. Failures, I've learned so much and I've grown so much through
Right.
them. Can you be make it a little more specific, that how was it a blessing in your life?
How was failure a blessing? It slowed me down because I tend to operate quickly. I make decisions quickly,
Hmm.
and that is not always a good thing. I think failure made me more. It slowed me down, made me more considerate, and made me more willing to consider all the possibilities instead of what I wanted to do. No, there's a guy from my church who he was out of work for 9 months, and he kept getting these job interviews and it never worked out. And then finally he got a job like right before Christmas. And I'm like, yay. And I said, how long were you out of work? I think he said 9 months. I said, well, you had me beat by 2 months, because he had no idea. Most people who don't know my story just assume that I've skated through life, and because I tend to be fairly glib and pretty up and whatnot. And then when they hear my true story, they can't believe it. And
Yeah.
I'll tell them, well, that's what happened.
At this stage, if you had to go back, and at that moment when you were at a pivotal transition, is there something that you would tell yourself differently, or would you say something different to yourself?
Maybe.
Or
Yeah.
yeah.
This question has come up before. And I think what I would have done is I got a phone call from my sponsoring U.S. Senator, and he didn't get the information from me that he wanted, which is concerning an investigation, because I knew I couldn't tell him the specifics about any criminal investigation. It's not allowed. I think had I reported that to the Justice Department, that may have saved me from being fired. On the other hand, one of my colleagues who was fired did exactly that, and he still got fired. I don't know. There's some things you just don't know in life, and you have to be okay with that. But that's probably the only thing I would have changed. And it may not have changed what happened to me, but at least no one would say, but you didn't report it as soon as you could have, which is true. I should have reported it much sooner than I did.
So now you've had for 30 years of naval services, and now you're here at Wheaton. This is the time when most people start talking about legacy as well. And what does that look like for you? What would you want the people, the students that you're teaching, what would you want them to remember long, long after that you're gone?
I think what I would like to hear them say is, I really enjoyed taking Captain Iglesias' class, because it wasn't just a bunch of theory. It came right from the heart. It came from hard-won experiences. It was based on actual life and not just what could have happened. And I want to see even more. I think I've been keeping track of people I've helped get into public service. I think I've got 28 of my former students into intelligence services, into the military, typically in the JAG Corps, the legal corps, national security jobs. So yeah, I've got about 28, and I wanted to leave an impact, not just in the general sense of good knowledge. Look, knowledge comes and goes, but if I give them the tools necessary for them to apply for a high level job, for a good job, for a career, then I've done my job.
That's inspiring and for the students to hear as well. And I know that they speak really highly of you.
We're
And
good.
yeah. How has your leadership change evolved over the years?
How has my leadership changed? That's a really hard question to answer. I don't think it's changed a whole lot. I think I was fairly
Or evolved, I guess that would be a better terminology because we learn with every job, every position, it
right.
teaches something, and we keep adding that to our toolkit. And so, how would you say, what were you at 28 to now when you are teaching people of that age now?
Yeah,
Probably.
it's true, and that's interesting that you'd put it that way, but it's true. At age 28, which is not much older than my current students are, I was trying cases. What really helped me grow up was the several things: getting married, having children, defending people in court martial cases. Because I realized I could not blow this off. I had to treat it very seriously, I had to be fully prepared, because what I did would affect the rest of their lives.
Hmm.
And it's true. So I had some clients who ended up doing pretty well. Some were found not guilty. Some were given a higher medical disability rating, because that's the first job I had in the Navy was medical disability cases. And I realized that if I didn't do my job well, they would not get rated very well.
In real life, how do you make those choices when you're not unsure about certain situations or you're unclear, it's ambiguous? What drives your decisions?
I tried to do the right thing, the morally right thing. I tried to do the legally right thing, and I tried to do it within a reasonable amount of time. But ultimately, as a lawyer, see, here's what people don't understand about lawyers. We're representing people. It's their case, it's their life. They have to decide. They tell us what to do within reason. If they do things that are so off the reservation, we have to tell them that. We'll have to tell them, I can't do that for you in court, because that's going to get me disbarred. It's going to get me disciplined. But absent that, it's their call, and we have to represent them zealously and ethically and to the full extent of the law.
Looking at your personal life, if you have to make personal choices,
Mm-hmm.
are there certain values that you stick by that these are my guiding forces? How do you make those decisions?
My guiding principles, I would say, for me, as somebody who represented literally hundreds of people, I would have to say, never put your own integrity at risk. You need to tell your clients what the truth is, what their chances of prevailing are. And if they still want to go forward, then you give it your best shot, but you can't guarantee any results. Look, I've lost cases, I've won cases, but I think I've never had anyone accuse me of not being zealous. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it is. That brings me to my final question, which is that if someone who's listening to this podcast is feeling overwhelmed by, let's say, the complexity or the moral choices or ethics within their leadership position, is probably there is a ask to compromise, what would you want them to remember, or what advice would you want them?
Don't compromise your morals, be number one. Don't compromise what you've always done. If what you've always done is a morally correct thing.
Hmm.
Also, get advice from people who are similarly situated. I've already mentioned that I had 6 other people I constantly referred, and we were in constant communication, what to do, what to testify. It was important to us to be in contact because we couldn't do this by ourselves. The fact that there were others was so important. And I would say to the person, your hypothetical person, just say, talk to people who might have similar issues, similar backgrounds, and talk to them and say, what would you do? Don't think you have all the answers, because no one does.
Yeah, I had a guest on a previous guest of mine, and often it is quoted that leadership can be lonely. It can be lonely at the top,
It's
when
true.
you are. But he also said that If you're lonely, then you're doing something wrong. And it's probably what you're saying is that you get reach out to people, talk to them,
Right.
because if you're making decision in isolation and with just your thinking, it might not give you the full perspective of it. And taking in somebody else's perspective and their thought or what they would do will give you a new perspective of, you don't have to do that same
Right.
choice. You can evaluate based on your values and morals and what does integrity mean to you.
So my wife and I taught parenting classes for about 10 years. And one of the biggest principles that I've taken from that to my life is right, even if nobody's doing it. And wrong is wrong, even if everybody's doing it. And I believed it then, and I believe it now. And if people realize that, I think it'll really help insulate them from making some horrendous bad mistakes. Not good mistakes, but bad mistakes.
Mistakes. Yeah. What has parenting taught you about leadership?
A lot. Patience is important. We're all gifted differently. Yeah. That leadership of a family is similar to other types of leadership because your children aren't going to automatically assume that what you're saying is the right thing. You'll be tested. I thought it was great preparation. Yeah, I wouldn't mind going back to teaching parenting classes. It was a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, it sounds fun, and it can be. I think a lot of people need it. Also, I certainly needed it in my time.
Right.
Even now,
Well,
it's.
you and your husband did a good job, so I don't think you need to worry.
I don't think I'm not fully convinced of that. I think it's not. It's people like you who've mentored him, and you've introduced him to other mentors, and I think they've all of you have played an equal role in developing him as a
Good,
person.
good.
And so I won't take the full credit, and we've made our mistakes as parents,
Well, of
believe me.
course, everyone does. Yeah.
Yeah, but obviously he's thriving and he's doing well in life, so I won't fully discount our contribution.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much, Captain. Thank you for your time. And this has been such an incredible conversation, so many learnings.
Good.
And I really cherish this conversation.
Thank you
So,
so much, ma'am, and have a good day.
you too.